Highlighting local high school athletes and coaches. It's the #1 local sports radio station in the 757. This is ESPN Radio 94.1, and this is the 757 at 6.
With Independence Day weekend right here on the horizon, we thank you for listening to the 757 at 6 on this Thursday night. Matt Hatfield here with you, and at this time we're joined by a special guest here on the 757 at 6. He is the publisher for Tar Heel Illustrated. That's the UNC site on the Rivals Network powered by Yahoo Sports. Go check them out on the web at northcarolina.rivals.com and give them a follow on Twitter at Heel Illustrated. We say hello to our pal AJ Andrew Jones here on ESPN Radio 94.1. Good to see you in person over the weekend, and tell me you didn't get as mean a sunburn last Saturday as I did.
Yeah, I did, and I realized for the first time that my hair is a little thinner up top because some of that sunburn is on my scalp now. So age happens, man. It was great seeing you in person, by the way. I really enjoyed that.
Likewise, good chat with you. And I got it. I covered every part of me with the stuff, the sun lotion, except my arms. So my arms were like as red as lobsters when I got out of there. So
yeah, I was pretty red. My wife was kind of laughing at me about it, so I gave her a good chuckle. And I guess at the expense of my discomfort, it was worth it.
Well, big week for the Heels here on the football front. They land the 5-star from our area here in Tidewater out of Princess Anne High in Virginia Beach, Tony Grimes. And all your years of covering UNC athletics on the football side, AJ, how significant of a commitment is this for them?
The most significant. I took over THI August 1st, 2014, so I'm entering my 7th year right now in this position. But I've covered the ACC going back to 1996, and talking with a few other people who pay attention to this stuff, and not everybody in the media pays attention to recruiting, as you know. The name Ronald Curry kept popping up about the significance of this football commitment. Curry, of course, played both sports at Carolina, but he was certainly a more of a football commit than a basketball one. Football was the #1 sport for him there. It was his priority. And when he committed to Carolina back in, I guess it was around that in 1996, 97, that was enormous. And that was before the recruiting industry exploded. And I think it was a big part of getting it in that direction. This, to me, is the most significant since then for a couple of reasons. First of all, they don't get many 5-stars at Carolina. The last one was Elijah Hood, running back from Charlotte, who had a nice career at Carolina and a brief NFL career. Before that, you really got to go back to Ronald. I mean, they've had some really big football commitments before, and they've had some good classes even before Mac Brown got there. But what this does, they've already shown that Mac Brown is building a fence around North Carolina, which is loaded with talent this year. But he had to prove they can go outside the state and get someone. And not only did they do that with a player that was coveted by everybody in the country, but they also did it from an area that they need to get back into and having a lot of success in, being the 757, which they kind of didn't get a lot of kids from there for a while. But getting Tony Grimes, having Dre Bly in the picture, the residual effect of this commitment, I think, could be significant for UNC.
Yeah, and I want to get to that Dre Bly angle with you here in a moment, but you bring up the name Ronald Curry. That always takes people back because we have arguments with the new age and the older age of who's the best to ever come out of the 757. You hear his name. More commonly, you hear the name Percy Harvin these days, who started at Lansdowne High in Virginia Beach before playing at Florida and then in the NFL. And I always tell people with Curry, I said, if you want to know how great he was, he had 185 touchdowns he was responsible for, most in VHSL history. The next closest from our area was Philip Sims, and he had 66 fewer, and he set the VHSL passing touchdown record. So that puts in perspective just how dominant Curry was, and you guys got to see him up close and personal in college, too. Well,
you know, you met Jacob, who's on my staff.
Yes.
Jacob's young and just getting started in this industry, and I was telling him about Ronald Curry, and, his head was spinning, and he didn't know who Ronald Curry is. I think he knows he's a former UNC guy. That might be about it. And I told him, I said, look at it this way. He was the National High School Player of the Year in football and in basketball.
Right.
He was the starting quarterback on a team that beat Auburn in the Peach Bowl and finished nationally ranked. And in between the end of that regular season and the bowl game, he started at point guard in a couple of basketball games on a team that ended up winning 16 in a row, was ranked #1 in the country at one point. That's all you need to know about Ronald Curry. I guess that ends the discussion, right?
Yeah, it says it all, doesn't it? I mean, well, and you brought it up, AJ, that they've recruited this area before UNC, going back to the days of Amos Lawrence and then Curry in the 90s. Got a guy in Travis Hughes from Kempsville in Virginia Beach in the early part of the 2000s. But now with Daz Newsome on the roster, who we'll touch on, Cameron Kelly, Grimes on the way. We could be seeing another one join here in a few weeks in George Wilson from Green Run. I mean, this feels like this is the beginning of more to come for UNC and the start of something.
Yeah, and it's coinciding at a time when Virginia Tech is not having a tremendous amount of success there, and UVA is, I don't know how to categorize what UVA is doing in that area. So it's an opportunity for somebody to come in there and get some work done. I know that Maryland's been trying hard. Penn State's offered a lot of guys from that area. But North Carolina's a fit. If you talk to people in North Carolina, certainly here in the Triangle, which is only a few hours away from Virginia Beach, they joke that the Tidewater area is just northeastern North Carolina anyway. So many really, really good UNC football and basketball players have come from that area. And so it is sort of a joke here, and I guess we'll see how much they can make that become a air quotes here, reality in the next several years. But I think the chance is pretty strong that UNC's presence is going to be pretty strong there. They're going to get their share of kids from that area.
We're talking with Andrew Jones. He's the publisher of THI. That's northcarolina.rivals.com, the UNC site on the Rivals Network. It's the 757 at 6 here on ESPN Radio 94.1. Give them a follow on Twitter, too, at Heel Illustrated. And AJ Dre Bly, I mean, his status as a UNC great from the player perspective, it's well established and cemented. That doesn't change. But when you add to what he's starting to do from the coaching and more specifically recruiting standpoint, how much is he elevated in Carolina football lore, I guess you would say, or does it have to wait in a way for major results on the field to increase the stature among most beloved Heels?
Well, I would liken it to being like in this skyscraper that's got an elevator on it, kind of on the outside. If you're standing on the ground, you can see the elevator go from the first floor to like the 50th floor, right?
Okay.
Right now, you're about the 25th floor, and the elevator just went by going up. I think that's kind of where he is with UNC coaching lore right now. It just went up here this past week because of Tony Grimes, and clearly he's getting a lot of credit for that, as he should. But the coaching side of things, I think, is what will cement it down the road if he's able to show that he can develop NFL cornerbacks. That's ultimately going to be the other part of his job. Bring him in and coach him up. Tony Grimes actually told me the other day, he almost got defensive when talking about how other people are pretty much, he didn't say they're recruiting against him this way, but it's obvious that they are, saying, why would you go play for, I'm paraphrasing now, why would you go play for a guy that's only coached for 1 year? Well, I mean, Dre's coached longer than that, but coached at this level for 1 year, yes. But if you saw what he had to deal with last year, a ton of injuries at the corner for Carolina. They played basically every available cornerback that they had that was still healthy at the time that they played, including DeAndre Hollins. He had 3 days to get him ready for the Duke game, and Hollins ended up playing 80 snaps that game, and Carolina won. He made a couple of PBUs in the corner of the end zone that, given the way things played out, could have been the difference in the game. And that was Dre pulling him aside and saying, son, I'm getting you ready. 3 weeks earlier, DeAndre Hollins was about the 9th cornerback on the roster. So in the small sample size that people have seen so far, the returns are pretty good. What we've seen from him are pretty positive. But he's going to have to do it again, and certainly it's going to have to work with Tony Grimes. Tony Grimes said he wants to be a top 5 NFL pick. Well, it's going to be Dre Bly's job to get him there. And if he does, then they're going to have their pick of the litter down the road.
And Mac Brown has the history of winning at the big level when he was at Texas, of course, too. And we were just at this Game Academy last week, and we mentioned there in Virginia Beach at the Sportsplex, so many talented underclassmen in the area, and they're already building a rapport with many of them. UNC, the classes of 2022, 2023, even a couple of 2024 kids that turned a lot of heads. And I think, AJ, not just for UNC, but for everybody in the industry, in the college football, this is a time where recruiting is ever-changing. So the more you can build these relationships earlier, I think the better, which I don't know if that was always necessarily the case, but I think it can benefit them getting in this area, don't you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What's interesting is that we wondered back in early March when everything started shutting down how that was going to affect recruiting, and everyone had to change. And the schools that want to bring guys in and share their names on the video boards and run videos for them and give them tours of all of this all these amazing facilities, couldn't do that. I know that there are virtual tours going on, but a virtual tour is nothing like the real thing. So what's happened is coaches and players have had to get to know each other more. And Mac joked a few weeks ago, we had him on a Zoom. He said, I'm just talking to these kids, just having conversations. And Tony actually said that's one thing about Dre, is that Dre will call up and they just have a regular conversation. We ran a piece today on Tyshawn Chapman, his 2022 kid, who is a teammate of Tony's at Princess Anne. Mm-hmm. And the thing that he actually lightened up about the most in the interview was when he said, he'll just talk to Dre about whatever. They're just getting to know each other. Obviously, coaches got to know kids before, but now that's the premium. And what's interesting, we're seeing a lot more kids commit, Matt, than we thought we would during the pandemic, which is still obviously shutting all this stuff down. So if you're a good communicator, if you're good at building relationships, if you can do it face-to-face and you can do it over Zoom as well, then those programs are going to have an advantage. And it looks to me like UNC is one of the programs that has taken advantage of that, because they've gotten most of their commitments since the shutdown started.
And now a top 10 recruiting class, according to Rivals.com so far here in the class of 2021. We talked with Adam Friedman last night from Rivals.com, and he brought up about the fact that, or actually it was 2 nights ago, he said, listen, you look at, like you just said, we could have a lot of flips, decommitments you don't know with things, but I think they're in good shape, UNC, what they're doing. And Reese Becker, our reporter for Virginia Preps, when he spoke with Grimes, the fact that his commitment ceremony, he talked about just how personable Dre Bly, as well as Mac Brown, the head coach, were, in addition to, just not just Bly, but that was a big deal as he narrowed things down to those Final Four, and it made the choice of the heels over the likes of Georgia, Ohio State, and Texas A&M. I want to get to this year's current situation with UNC with you, AJ. A lot of offensive talent. Daz Newsome out of our area from Hampton High, most slot receptions among returning wide receivers in the country with 72. They got the backs, they got the receivers, they got the talented quarterback in Sam Howell. It's hard to see many people stopping them from moving the ball down the field and scoring a bunch of points should we get football, and heightened optimism for sure here. I imagine more of the questions come on the defensive side of the ball for UNC.
Well, yeah, especially up front. I think they're in pretty good shape, maybe even really good shape at linebacker. Chaz Surratt could be a high first-round pick, which is pretty amazing given the track that he's taken to get to that point. And Jeremiah Gemmel is a solid player who needs to go up another notch to be a really good player. And if he does that, they're going to be in terrific shape in the middle at linebacker. Their secondary is extremely deep. They've got a lot of bodies back there, a lot of guys I think that they'll be able to trust. And with that, Jay Bateman's creative defense will show a lot of looks. They'll disguise a lot of things, and they'll probably take a lot of chances. They'll blitz from the edge a lot. But the problem I think that they're going to face is up front. I don't know what kind of a run stop unit that's going to be. I don't know what kind of a pass rush. I don't know what kind of containment they're going to have from those guys. They relied heavily last year on Aaron Crawford and Jason Strowbridge, and they're gone. If you're a Carolina fan, perhaps one little note of positivity is that they were able to move Strowbridge outside on the end a little bit in the last few games of the season because Jaleel Taylor made a lot of progress at tackle. And Ray Vahasek, a kid that came in from junior college and hadn't played in a couple of years because he had shoulder injuries and hadn't even lifted weights in a year, finally got healthy enough to start lifting weights, and he played pretty well late. But you're talking 151 snaps for Vahasek. You're talking 280 or so for Taylor. And some you're going to have those guys try to anchor a front line with the schedule that starts out at Central Florida and then Auburn and Atlanta before you get into ACC play. That's a big, big task for those guys. And considering the fact that they haven't proven anything yet, I think that's the question mark. And if Carolina does not live up to the wild expectations its fans have, and I think perhaps maybe a little unrealistic at this point, it will be, I think, because the defensive line struggles. Teams can run right at them, and they can push that ball in the end zone and when they get inside the 10-yard line. And if they can maybe control clock a little bit at times, and not everybody runs spread, and certainly not everybody in the ACC runs spread, that could be a problem for Carolina this season. But otherwise, I think they're in really good shape defensively. Got a lot of dudes, and of course, as you said, the offense has a chance to be very, very prolific.
And as good a chance as anybody in that chaotic Coastal, which has produced a new division representative in the ACC championship game pretty much every year. Last one with you, Agent. I appreciate the time. I'm sure we'll get you back on as we get closer to September. Looking at the slate here, And they had those two challenging games right out of the gate, as you mentioned, with UCF and Auburn before a matchup with James Madison, which many of our listeners know has been an FCS power and played in the national championship game at that level last season. Looking at the schedule, big picture here, what's your feelings? And then the feeling on full season, no season, delayed season, fans, no fans, what's your take there?
I'll answer the last part of the question first.
Okay.
I don't know. I thought I had a good feel on it about 5 weeks ago. I was on a radio show in South Carolina. I said, I think there'll be fans, stadium's packed, it'll be fairly much business as usual. Now I don't know that. I'm hearing some concerning things with people I talk to with respect to high school sports. I spoke to somebody in Virginia today about high school sports in Virginia this fall. Mm-hmm. He wasn't very optimistic. So I think there'll be a season. I'm not sure even the sports writers will be there. I've heard that some schools may not allow visiting media. They'll allow home media, but not visiting media. We won't have access to practice, or everything will be on Zoom unless we're at a game, and that may even be on Zoom post-game from a press box, which would be bizarre.
Wow.
You know, personally, you can't cover a team from a couch. You can't cover them from home, in my experiences. You got to be there. You've got to get a vibe that only being present, you know, in the locker room in basketball with the kids after a game in football that can give you to best cover a team. So I think that the challenge will be significant for everybody, including the media this year. If they do play the full schedule, I think that Carolina, you know, those first two games are going to be really tough. I think if a split, Carolina fans should be really happy with that. And then they got a game at Miami later in the year, which will be a challenge. And they've got Virginia Tech, which I think the Hokies ought to be pretty decent this year, and usually decent Hokie teams beat the Tar Heels, so that's something that they're going to have to deal with. And they've lost to UVA 3 straight times. So there are a lot of challenges on the schedule. I think that the personnel is there to win a lot of these games. If the defensive line could be average, I think they have a chance to win 10 games. But I'm thinking 9-3, lose a game in the league, maybe 2 games in the league, and split those first 2. And at 9-3, and if you go 6-2 in this Coastal, that puts you in the mix at the end.
Yeah.
And I just think that, you know, a good part of their schedule, they have JMU, which will be, you know, as you said, they're a real good FCS team. They got UConn later in the year. That's not going to be an issue. And a couple of the teams in their division are not going to be an issue. And their crossover opponent, other than NC State, which is their annual opponent, is Boston College. Although it's in November up there, I still think that that's the kind of game this team at that point should be able to handle.
He's Andrew Jones from Tar Heel Illustrated, the publisher for the UNC Sun, the Rivals Network. Go check them out, northcarolina.rivals.com. Give them a follow on Twitter, too, at Heel Illustrated. It's the best darn coverage of UNC football anywhere on the web. Thank you so much, my friend. Enjoy the holiday weekend, and we'll talk soon.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it. Take care, man.